Assalamu alaikum. Our lecture today includes reviewing the principles of communicative language teaching. In this lecture, we will discuss 10 items and answer 10 questions. Number one, what are the goals of teachers who use communicative language teaching? It's very important for any teacher to know what is the goal of the teaching process. So first, when you start teaching, you should identify what is your goal as a teacher. In communicative language teaching, the goal is to enable students to communicate in the target language, that is, to develop the students' communicative competence, their ability to use language in different situations and for different purposes. To do this, the students need knowledge of linguistic forms, meanings, and functions. And also, the students must be able to choose from among these the most appropriate form given the social context and the role of the participant, which means that the communication produced by students should be appropriate to the context in which communication takes place and the role of the participant, the character, and the process of communication. Second, what is the role of the teacher? The teacher is responsible for doing different aspects in the classroom and the communicative approach. But the most important role of the teacher in the communicative approach is that of communication facilitator. The teacher facilitates communication in the classroom by providing them with activities that gives them the opportunity to communicate, to interact with each other, to negotiate meaning. So the teacher promotes communication. In this role, one of his major responsibilities is to establish situations likely to promote communication. During the activities, he acts as an advisor, answering students' questions and monitoring their performance. He might make notes of their errors to be worked on at later time during more accuracy-based activities. We will talk about this point in relation to students' errors. At other times, he might be a co-communicator, engaging in the communicative activity along with the students. Sometimes the students acts as an independent participant with the students. Another idea in point 2, which is the role of students. The role of students is related to the role of the teacher. The communicative approach is a learner-centered approach in which the focus is upon the learner. The students are supposed to be learning actively. They are supposed to be active doing most of the activities. Students are above all communicators. They are actively engaged in negotiating meaning, which means exchange of meaning, the most important role of the student. And communicative language teaching is as communication or as meaning negotiator. So the students are actively engaged in negotiating meaning and trying to make themselves understood, even when their knowledge of the target language is incomplete. The teacher's role is less dominant because the student or the approach is a student-centered approach. Number 3 is related to the characteristics of teaching learning process. The most obvious characteristic of English language teaching or of communicative language teaching is that almost everything that's done is done with communicative intent, with the aim to make the students communicate or develop the ability to communicate in a meaningful way in a variety of situations and contexts. Students use the language a great deal through communicative activities such as games, role plays, and problem solving tasks. So, the most important characteristic of teaching process is the process of communication and the communicative approach. 4. What is the nature of students teacher interaction? What is the nature of students interaction? We mentioned that the communicative approach is a learner centered approach, number one. Number two, the student's role is that of active negotiators. So the students are active, they are the center of the teaching process. Most of the activity is done, or most of the activities are done by the students themselves. That's why we have a lot of students interaction. Do we have students teacher interaction? Yes. Do we have teacher students interaction? Yes. The teacher gives the students instructions and describes how the activities are practiced in the classroom, and sometimes the teacher acts as a participant in the process of communication, as we have mentioned this in relation to the teacher's role. So we have students interaction, students teacher interaction, and teacher students interaction. But the most important idea is students interaction. 5. How are the feelings of the students dealt with? One of the basic assumptions of communicative language teaching is that by learning to communicate, students will be more motivated to study another language since they will feel they are learning to do something useful. So, the most important idea is that the students are motivated. They like the process of learning and the communicative approach. Also, the activities are enjoyable for the students, such as role play, games, problem solving. All these activities are considered as enjoyable activities in the process of language learning. How is the language viewed in the communicative approach? Language is for communication. Linguistic competence, that is the ability to know the grammatical structures of the language or the knowledge of forms of language and their meanings, is only one part of communicative competence. That is the ability to to be communicatively competent, to have not only linguistic competence but also socio-linguistic competence, discourse competence, and strategic competence. Another aspect of communicative competence is knowledge of the functions that language is used for. So, the most important idea in the way language is viewed is that language is viewed as communication or interaction. Concerning culture, how culture is viewed, culture is the everyday lifestyle of people who use language. That's why we focus upon the use of authentic materials which are taken from real life situations in order to understand the cultural aspects of people who speak the language natively. There are certain aspects of it that are especially important to communication. The use of non-verbal behavior, for example, which might receive great attention, non-verbal behavior like gestures, like facial expressions, different aspects of the target language. 7. What areas of language are emphasized? What language skills are emphasized? First, we will answer the first question related to language areas which are emphasized. Language functions might be emphasized over forms. In the idea of language teaching, we have form and function, which means we have structure and meaning. Sometimes, or in some approaches, form is emphasized more than function, like in the audiolingual method. And sometimes, function is emphasized over form, like in communicative language teaching. So, the most important idea is meaning and functions more than forms. Concerning the second part of the question, how language skills are viewed, in communicative language teaching, learners are supposed to be provided with meanings that they need to understand and express. So, understanding and expressing could be either oral in the case of listening and speaking, or written in the case of reading and writing. That's why all skills are very important in the communicative approach and emphasized from the beginning of lessons and activities. Students work on all four skills from the beginning, just as oral communication is seen to take place through negotiation between speaker and listener, so too is meaning thought to be derived from the written word through an interaction between the reader and the writer. The writer is not present to receive immediate feedback from the reader, but the reader tries to understand the writer's intention, and the writer writes with the reader's perspective in mind. So in both cases, whether in speaking and listening, we have communication, or in reading and writing, we have also communication between the writer and the reader. The writer writes with the reader's perspective in mind, and the reader tries to understand what is the intended meaning presented by the writer. That's why all skills are emphasized from the beginning. Now we come to a very important question. Why I'm saying that this question is very important? Because most of the students in our department, when they want to start teaching, they ask me whether they should use the target language all the time or not. And sometimes it's difficult to use the target language with students. The answer to this question is that the language of instruction in communicative language teaching is the target language. Target language should be used most of the time. Only in certain situations when the words are very difficult or ideas are very difficult to explain, the native language is used. Otherwise, the target language is used as a medium of instruction. It is used to give the students instructions about how to practice a particular activity, because the most important idea in communicative language teaching is using language to learn it. So, the target language should be used most of the time. Judges' use of the student's native language is permitted in communicative language teaching only when it is very, very important. However, whenever possible, the target language should be used not only during communication activities, but also for explaining the activities to the students. So, in this case, we know the rule that the target language should be used even if it is difficult for the students. We can start by teaching them important words that we use regularly, and then they will go on in learning to listen and use the target language. 9. How is evaluation accomplished? Teacher evaluates not only his students' accuracy but also their fluency. We should distinguish between accuracy and fluency. Accuracy, which is knowledge of correct grammatical structures and pronunciation. While fluency means, in addition to this knowledge, the ability to use this knowledge to communicate fluently, quickly, without hesitation. So, in this case, the students are evaluated according to their ability to use language correctly and appropriately, which is the idea of communicative competence. It is not enough to use language correctly, but it should be appropriate to the social context in which communication takes place, appropriate to the relationship between the participants in the process of communication. So, this is the standard according to which the students are evaluated. Finally, we have how does the teacher respond to students' errors? Again, we have the same idea of distinction between accuracy and fluency. That in communicative classroom, we have two types of activities. We have activities which are accuracy based, focus upon grammatical structures and knowledge of how to pronounce the vocabulary items correctly. At this type of a practice, the teacher should correct students' errors, while in fluency based activities, the teacher should postpone the correction till the end of the activity in order not to disturb communication and to encourage the students to communicate in spite of lack of knowledge and motivates them to communicate and interact using the target language. Errors of form are tolerated during fluency-based activities and are seen as a natural outcome of the development of communication skills. Students can have limited linguistic knowledge and still be successful communicators. The teacher may not, may note the errors during fluency activities and return to them later with accuracy based activities. So, this is the way we should deal with the students' errors in teaching according to communicative language. Teaching first, we should identify the activity, whether it is an accuracy based activity or a fluency based activity, and accordingly, we decide to correct the error or to postpone correction to a later activity. Thank you very much. This is our lecture for today.